what I think the problem has been for this sector has been trust. You hear about all the cowboy builders, you hear about all these guys who, are paid for work and then they don't actually come out or they overcharge.
Welcome, everyone. And my guest today is Naveed, founder of EEH Solutions. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Just going from the background from the very start, what made you start EEH in the very beginning?
Uh, I never imagined myself having a construction firm or getting into the industry, really. I come from a financial services background, and my background was predominantly financial advice and mortgage advice. And I had only kind of really touched on the construction side as far as helping clients find developments and project managing, I guess, the development and finance side of it. Uh, but during COVID, it was a difficult period, and I found family members who were being furloughed or were at risk of losing their job, or facing resignations or whatever else was going on at the time, and they didn't know what would happen, and the uncertainty led to kind of me thinking about, what could I do to help? Because I had two brothers at the time who had been told that they could have redundancy packages coming through the post. My wife was told the same, and I was recently married at the time. So it was a challenging time, and they were coming to me and asking me to support them, I guess, during that period. And I just knew it wasn't sustainable long term. Like I just got married, bought a property, bought a house, and this was going on at a time when it was a lot happening in my life. And as everyone did during that time, everybody was glued to the 6 o'clock news when you would have all the evening updates about what was going on with COVID, about lockdown and everything else. And that's really where the journey began, because we were told about the Green Home Grant Scheme at the time. And I didn't think anything of it other than my mum was vulnerable to COVID, and could we possibly help keep her home warmer so that she's less vulnerable, because she had a heart and lung condition. So the journey began, and I got on the phone, started calling around, called installers, and everyone I called, I must have called, I would say at least a dozen installers, and they all said they were fully booked. And this is within sort of a day or two of it being announced. There was nobody interested even coming to do a survey at the time. So I dug around, found out a bit more, and realised that my mum's property was a solid wall property, and it was more difficult to treat, and the cost was high, and I think installers were a bit reluctant to do it. There's all these regulations and everything else involved. There was stigma behind installation and how badly it had been previously installed and everything else. Um, it got me thinking, okay, well, what if we did it ourselves? What if I start a business and, what will it take for me to start doing this? Um, Off the back, they said, look, if you're an installer, you can't install in your own property. But I thought, well, doesn't mean I've got to do it for that property, but what would it take for me to do it? So we start looking into it a bit deeper, and that's where the journey began. And my wife was then, lockdown had kind of opened up a little bit. Some people are now allowed back at work. My wife was now told like she's got an admin role within. She worked for JLR, well, one of the franchises for JLR, and she's now gone back to work. And now I found myself alone at home during COVID and during the lockdown, not allowed to really leave the house or anything like that. And I just started thinking about a business plan. And the funny story is I went to the Tesco's and queued up like everyone did, and bought two little mini whiteboards and little post-it notes, and a cork board and everything for notes, and just went home and just started brainstorming. And my wife got back from work and she saw what I can only imagine to be something out of a horror movie, where she's come home and it looks like there's writing on the wall, but it wasn't writing on the wall. I'd been writing on the French doors and using that for my brainstorming session, really. And the rest is really history. And then we just got going. She called my brother and my friend and said, I think he's gone mad, you need to get here. Which they then come and they talked to me, and I said, look, wow, what are you guys doing here? Let me show you my business model. And one thing then just led to another, and it just ignited it. And, I had a whole plan on how we were going to market, what we were going to do, and we were concentrating on the B2C market. And we had to get all these regulatory requirements in place. We had to get qualifications and do everything. So the journey began, and I resigned from my job overnight. My wife thought I was gone crazy. She called my parents saying, "I don't know what he's doing," and everything else. And at that time, I was the only one with a stable income, and for me to leave what was a good job and something I'd developed a career in for 9 years, to just get up and leave, she couldn't believe it. And so we got going, resigned, and just said, "Look, I'm doing this full time," and just got things moving. And it took us a time. It was not easy. We didn't earn any revenue for the first sort of 9 months at all. So we were relying heavily on my savings at the time. Because I was self-employed, I had some income coming in from the scheme at the time that the government had, which was literally the only income I had then. And still had a mortgage, had bills and everything else still during that period. And it just moved on from there. Um, we kind of started slowly. We started online campaigns, printed out leaflets, set up presentation like inductions and stuff. Firstly for my brothers, and then got other family and friends involved. And before you know it, we had about, within our first 6 weeks of actually going live, we had £3.5 million worth of orders. Just, and then we started to think about how we're going to deliver this. What will we do to actually make this happen? And we started using technology to help us from the very beginning. And I knew, like, I had this potential for growth, but I also knew that in order to scale this business, I need to create systems. And I then started doing coding in the evenings, and the first website I created myself. I started creating project management software and other things, and that's how we kind of got to a position where we could grow. So a lot had happened during that period, but we literally, just, I wouldn't say we were winging it. We had long days, long hours, 6, 7 of us running around different customers, knocking on doors. My brothers, my close friends, and my wife, all of us were involved in the process. And yeah, we got going, and we haven't looked back since, really. And that's kind of where it all began, and then grew from strength to strength. Went into more the contracting side. We've just moved into this office about, I would say, 4 or 5 months ago now. At the start, we never had an office. We were literally working from the kitchen. Offices were closed during lockdown, so we were seen as essential workers and stuff. So we
Well,
were able to get up and going. And I actually got COVID in the first properties we did. I actually got COVID, got really sick, ended up in hospital for 2 weeks during that time as well. And no one really knew what to do, because at that point everything was in my head. And actually, that was big lesson learned as to how we've grown as a business since. Because what I then did was put all the systems in place to ensure that if that ever occurred again, the business could still continue without me. So that's helped us grow, really.
you mentioned the Green Homes grant,
Yeah,
um, and that came into play, but then it changed quite quickly. So
yeah.
what
So
did this is moving and when the rules
Yeah, so the government had literally pulled a wrong rug from under our feet, really. Because on a Sunday afternoon at 6 o'clock, we got an email saying that the scheme was now ending all of a sudden. And I think we had 4 days to lodge any vouchers at the time. So over the next 4 days, we've then done an additional 100 and quotations, because the demand increased massively. And everybody wanted a property, they wanted a voucher, and so we've then gone from having £350 million worth of quotations now to additional nearly £2 million. We've got £5.5 million worth of work now to deliver, but we had no real knowledge on when or how long we could do this in. We just got cracking with it, got everything in place, and then a few weeks later we were then told, well, it's likely to be extended. It'll be another year and a half you've got to do these work. So we were starting to grow as a business and to create that capacity that we needed to grow, really. And that was the challenge. That was the challenge. So it's only about, I think, 3 months in that they then said, actually, the scheme will now end early. almost 14 months early now. And we had like, I think it was the end of November. So we'd started doing all the quotations in early, I think April. By May, we already had a £3.5 million worth of work. By the end of July, we had additional 1.5 million. We've started delivery. And then I think in November, the scheme kind of ended. And so we had to do our final lot of jobs by then. And there was so much that happened like during that period where I think I was very naive as well, not understanding how to control, I guess, a construction business at that scale so quickly. So we learned a lot of lessons really quickly, and we identified this is also during the period where it was high inflation in construction materials, and things were just going like almost in a spiral, where it was just we might lose control here. So we did have to put more systems in place to prevent that happening, and it did mean we had to let a lot of people down because just some of their projects just were no longer doable because of the cost of being so high now. So we delivered about £1.5 million worth of work out of the initial 3 million, and the vouchers for the new customers that came in, they never actually materialized. So we never got around to doing those additional anyway. But it then meant we've grown from a B2C business and thought, well, what can we now do? Because if we can work at this scale,
Yeah.
maybe we should be in contracting.
Yeah.
Because initially we were thinking we might do 10 or 15 houses a month. That's all. But we were now doing it at quite a large scale and quite successfully. And we were being audited on site by the manufacturer. So we grew a really strong partnership with a company called Weber St. Gobain, who were then sending an inspector, an application manager to come out to every single installation, spot checking every job we did to make sure the quality was there. So that was, I think, the best thing that could have happened to us because that ensured we always did everything to the highest quality and high standard. And we just you leverage that to keep growing. Any mistakes we made, we learnt really quickly from, and we're able to identify and move on, prevent it happening again, put things in place. And it wasn't just with me; it was the whole team. So at that time, I had two close friends working with us. I had both my brothers working with us and my wife. So everybody was learning really, really quickly. Could we repeat it? Could we do it again? I don't know if we could. It was one of those things that we just did at the time, used every last bit of energy we had to actually keep growing and keep going as well. And yeah,
So you've gone from building modular homes,
yeah,
standard
as well,
home
yeah. Yes, we
into
did. So those were predominantly external wall installations, and we've now kind of had to diversify because with the challenges going on in the construction industry, and I wouldn't just say the industry, it's the economy. We've had no option but to diversify. We have to pivot, but the pivot means that doesn't mean. Luckily for us, was we always did rendering, we always did facades, and we were doing some sort of maintenance works during that sort of period because we had to think outside the box because we were told now that actually this scheme is going to end early. So at the time we were thinking, well, we've got at least £5 million worth of jobs on our books. We're going to deliver that. And then all this uncertainty happened and meant we had to adapt quickly and move away. So we started looking at different opportunities, and we've had a great opportunity working with a very, really good client who's designed these, two-story modular homes. They look like a conventional build. They come from a factory, and essentially we worked in it's a high net worth area, really affluent area, and we essentially created, the facades and the render and the wall build-ups for these properties. Because sadly the manufacturer actually went into administration, so the client was then left with these properties that were left unfinished, and they required to actually get these, finished. We were recommended, and it was the first time this client's worked with us, and we've done really well with it, and I'm sure the client will continue to give us work from.
Yeah, yeah. And so you touched a little bit before on your tech stack and
Yeah.
some of the tools that you're using. And so what would you say saves you the most time, and where do you still need a human in this sort of loop of
Yeah,
process?
I mean, the biggest challenge for us is, as a growing business, is creating capacity. Staffing is difficult in the UK. It's not just about the cost. It's about the recruitment process. It's about finding the right staff has always been challenging for us. And what we're finding is that the industry itself isn't really attractive to new entrants, right? The moment they think of construction, they think of muddy boots and, working on a building site. So we've had no choice but to use a digital solutions. We very early on we've been using automations from day one. So we've tried to create a bit of a sort of a system lifecycle where workflows are working with one another. And early on, we've used project management software like Monday.com, Asana. We used HubSpot as a CRM. We use a different website. You mentioned earlier something about Shopify. We used Shopify as our first website actually because it meant it was quite easy for us to have a website that was just easy to build, very simple, but it didn't work for us as we grew. As we grew, we needed something a bit more complicated and a bit more user focused. So we've now got a website which is more B2B as well as B2C. So it concentrates on both clients now. That actually helps with our workflows and pipelines. And so we've got different, I would say different departments. So each department has required a different system now. So for our services side, our operations side, we use a system like we use JobLogic or alike for that to make sure our jobs are getting booked in and the clients are being served, and any issues with operatives or clients they can be resolved on there. Then with our project management, we're using Monday and others, and then we've got compliance related products that we've had to use as well. So those compliance ones have required really for us to make our workflow and our process easier. So we're not heavily resourced as far as admin goes, and it means that we can find issues early on. And then finally, just for quality controls purposes, really, because we've always used health and safety as a key element of our business from day one. So we've always had a health and safety system in place for our surveys, our, on-site, in any issues. We created a QR code, which everybody was given a key ring, a metal key ring, so they couldn't break it, it wouldn't get lost. And we also gave them a little sticker that they could stick on their van or on the back of a health and safety book, which they could then literally put anything they want to report from their phone directly onto our system, so someone in the office always got a notification of that. It just meant we were just streamlining everywhere we could. So it just meant we still needed someone in the office that was monitoring those things that were coming in. So now with AI coming in, it's now meant actually the automations are now linked to AI. We can now feed like a knowledge bank into like our system now, and it can either give information internally or it could be for customer focus side. And so we use an AI bot, for example, now who can help our service and office team to answer questions they might be asked from clients or residents or foreign
Yeah.
operation
Yeah.
in-house. And then it also helps the customer with any questions they might have. And it's been really, good for us. And we've identified issues that we were having, such as our next contract, well, our very first big contract was for the whole southeast of England. Huge contract, worth £160 million for the client, and we were helping deliver that across the southeast. So we're talking about from as far as sort of Surrey all the way across to Kent. We were covering a huge area, huge region in and out of London, all the way as far as sort of Clacton-on-Sea, down to Grays, Peterborough. So we were
Amazing.
working now at scale across the southeast. So we've gone from working in a small area, doing loads of multiple jobs, now working across the southeast. So we really had to gear fast and we had to gear quickly. And the only way that was possible was with using technology and systems. And I wouldn't say, I don't think I can say I'm a visionary in that way, but what we tried to do was the vision was that there's got to be solutions to grow, right? And what I did, which is probably an interesting part of the story, was during that time when we'd set up EEH to actually starting delivery, that Christmas and New Year's, 2 days, so Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, I worked for Amazon Flex.
Yeah.
And the reason I did it was because I was told about the system that they have and it's amazing. I wanted to know what the system did and how good it was. So I went on New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve. I actually delivered in my 5 Series at the time, and it was a 3 litre petrol. It was crazy that I was doing it, but I was delivering in that, and I didn't have a lot of deliveries to do. But I just realized how intuitive it was, how easy to use it was, and we used that as a kind of a benchmark and said, well, I need to get to that level. What can I do to get to that? So we now have a system which works very similar to like Uber Eats now. So we can book in jobs from here. It goes to the operatives, it goes to the resident, and what is now meant is we've created efficiencies there. So previously, let's say a guy's going from Harlow and going to Romford. What would happen is when he gets to Romford, the client might not be home, resident might not be home, or the guy's running late, and the resident's calling the office saying, "Where is your guy?" Okay, so this system that we've now developed with all the automations and everything that are now out there means that as soon as they accept a job, it notifies the resident of the ETA time, and they can track them coming to the house just like Uber Eats. And so the technology is now making it easier for us to communicate. And from a GDPR perspective, it means we no longer have to share any sensitive information with the operatives, right? And we're holding on to that data as well. We're protecting that data. And from a resident perspective, they know someone's coming to their house. So from a safety perspective, they'll be expecting someone to come and knock on the door. And, I'd like to think our guys are quite professional and everything else. But, the thing is, like, if you've got your old grandmother in her 80s,
Yeah.
she might be reluctant to open a door to someone. And this is why we did it. We also, with that QR code I talked about earlier, that allowed them to authenticate the guy on site. So we then created ID cards with a QR code that they could authenticate that this is someone that is from Eton stuff, and gave their name and everything specifically. So, we did that too. What I think the problem has been for this sector has been trust. You hear about all the cowboy builders, you hear about all these guys who, are paid for work and then they don't actually come out, or they overcharge, and
Yeah.
there's a huge trust issue in the
Yeah.
sector. And, for us, competency and quality has always been number one, but we have been very customer centric and client centric. And I think that's the only way we can move forward.
Absolutely. So what does the next 18 months look like for you?
So we're hoping 2026 is our best year to date. We've been luckily, we've been appointed on some frameworks and other procurement routes now, and these are really big opportunities for us. So we've not been able to get onto these sort of frameworks and procurement routes previously. We're now on these frameworks. We've got recognized. We won large scale project of the year this year at the Energy Efficiency Awards. So we're getting that recognition. And we've also, moved into various areas now. We're looking at developments. We're looking at the modular home section, side of work. And then we're looking at the building remediation stuff with all the new regulations, the Building Safety Act and stuff, looking at how we can actually expand on that side as well. And then we're also looking at the retrofit side. Now, all three areas have got a lot of backing from government. Government's really focused on it, and there's loads of regulations and changes that have come into the industry. So, I was at a cabinet office event a couple of weeks back, and they're talking about how it's going to trickle down, and we will start seeing those actually come into fruition, especially with the Procurement Act and everything that's coming there. The building safety side, the government's fast tracked a lot of the applications that were stuck, and then with the retrofit side, the government's given £13 billion pledge towards a retrofit, and then they've also given a pledge on building 1.5 million new homes. So we see that confidence coming in from the government has been quite a key area for us to leverage that growth. And what we're looking for really now is just the clients really, and just good partners. We can concentrate on the good companies, the guys that do really want to make a change, and they do want to help tackle poverty and get to reach net zero and everything else, and do the right thing. And there's a cultural shift, I believe, that will happen now
Mhm.
as a result of all these new regulations and everything else. And that is a positive sign. I've come from a financial services background. Coming into the construction industry, looking at the culture in it, does shock me. When I came in, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe that this was allowed. A lot of the time, and we're seeing now consumer protection becoming a large, aspect of what the industry needs to do. And we're also looking at beyond just the construction side, what will happen to the property after the installation is completed with Grenfell and everything else that's happened. So, I'm really confident that 2026 will be a big year, and we're hoping that we can now widen the business from just being EEH Solutions to actually having three segments of the business that are then working separately, and that's where we want to go now.
Amazing, amazing. Honestly, thanks so much for sharing the story. Really appreciate your time. I wish you all the best for the future.